This is update for October 9, 2022, day 228 of the war, end of the date update. It's going to be fairly short update as video, as there's not much is going on. So one of the few things. So first, Ukraine is getting even more advanced artillery systems, and by that I mean self-propelled howitzers with the length of the barrel, 52 calibers length of the barrel. And at this point, so this is Susanna 2 from Slovakia. I think Ukraine is going to get 12 or 16 of those, don't remember off the top of my head. And then also Ukraine going to get 12 more Caesars from France. Those Caesars were intended, they actually were made for Denmark. But because of the war, apparently Denmark agreed that those 12 units will be transferred to Ukraine. So at this point, Ukraine certainly has total advantage in this advanced artillery systems over the Russian artillery. And if it's being used skillfully, correctly, and everything, this is essentially guarantees disruption of any Russian offensive and creates this pinch bar, as I called it, to basically penetrate Russian defenses anywhere and sort of successfully do offensive. The problem is, as before, there's still, up to this day, no equivalent over LAN 10. For those who are new, just look at the videos. I think I did them in May and then in July probably, and maybe in August, about Orlan 10, which is excellent Russian reconnaissance and correction system for artillery units. Works perfectly with those artillery units. I will make sure that I'll make separate video on this topic, so then you can have it always as a reference. But basically, at this point, Ukraine totally exceeds Russian forces in this advanced artillery systems, which essentially also means that the initiative is totally in Ukrainian hands. Again, there's still problem and it's Ukrainian problem. This is not the West problem. It's within the country, and I mentioned many times, it's completely unprofessional and inept political leadership in Ukraine that prevents actually prevents basically entrepreneurs in the military space from being able to start businesses in this area. Essentially, any development is prohibited by private private investors. It has to go through the government, and as long as it goes through the government, it's absolute complete corruption, red tape, and nothing is being done there, only money stolen. So that's sort of, as you can see, that political problem is turning into the problem on the battlefield as well. And now let's actually switch a little bit what's going on Russian/Belarus side and all of that. So tomorrow there should be a National Security Council in Russia, which is obviously headed by a Russian president. We'll find out more what they're going to decide, what decisions they're going to make. Apparently there will be more changes in the Russian leadership on the battlefield. I mentioned yesterday about Surovikin, who is basically a new leader on the battlefield. From what people say, he received total carte blanche to do whatever he wants, whatever he needs to achieve success, essentially. So in other words, this is kind of situation for him personally, and he probably is comfortable with that. It's either you succeed or you're gonna die. Basically, there's no middle for him personally. So that's obviously pretty strong incentive. Let's put it this way. Then related to the Crimean bridge, which was attacked, we discussed it, probably by Ukrainian forces. We don't have any specific information, but that's the most likely. There is apparently among the civilian population, it starts to sink in the Crimea that this is turning into battlefield pretty soon, and people are fleeing Crimea in droves. So there is a huge traffic jam from Crimea to Russia on that still functioning half of the Crimean bridge. There are reports that the length of this traffic jam up to 10 kilometers. Basically, whoever can, they try to get out from Crimea. Now let's switch a little bit to Belarus. Belarus president, who is, as we discussed many times, is in the pocket of Russia, and essentially it's just one country with two faces, basically, right? And so his Belarus president said that Ukraine preparing to attack Belarus, which obviously is not true because, as we all understand, right now all of Ukrainian forces are focused um, you on succeeding on this southern and eastern front lines. So, but that sort of like kind of like a job warning that's saying like, okay, attack Ukrainian forces probably gonna attack soon Belarus is the point of all of that is to kind of create sort of induce stress on Ukrainian side among Ukrainian political leadership and maybe military leadership about like, okay, maybe there will be something from some attacking forces from Belarus. So and that the point of that is to keep some of the Ukrainian forces on the Belarus border because you're never safe, you're never secure. That there could be another incursion from Belarus, whether it's going to be just Belarus forces or Russian forces or joint or Russian forces disguised as Belarus forces. Nobody knows. So that's creating that situation. In addition, there are reports that actually Belarus is transferring significant amount of its own stockpiled military equipment to Russia, specifically tanks, T-72s. There was a huge trains of T-72s heading from Belarus storage facilities to Russia. Basically, it looks like Russia does not have enough readily available T-72s in large numbers. Russia has a huge stockpile, but that stockpile was sort of rotting under the sun and rain for probably 20 years, maybe 25 years. And it takes time, even though there's a huge number of those machines. You cannot just like, okay, in a week they're gonna be battle ready. They probably will take like 2-3 months to make them battle ready, and not all of them. And so essentially, this is like basically not readily available resource, basically. So that's the whole point about that. So it's not like Russia does not have military equipment. Yes, it does has, but the storage has always been a problem in the Soviet army, which is Russia is and Ukraine is and Belarus is. Actually, Belarus is actually on the better side for whatever reason. Don't have perfect explanation there, but they've always been on the better side, more organized, more clean, and so on. So, so that's why they basically donating those resources. In return, Belarus received loan, or maybe it's just technically it's called loan of 1.5 billion US dollars from Russia. They always get those loans from Russia. Basically, they live of those loans and of Russian crude oil used to. Now they don't have that ability to process that Russian crude oil, so they're just getting loans directly from Russia. They never pay them back. So this is just basically transfer because it's essentially one state, but it's disguised as a loan. The transfer of the money is disguised as loans, essentially. Another important topic in the world this time is the West is definitely getting very, very, I would say, scared, if I don't mince the word, of the potential of the nuclear war, escalation to the nuclear war. And you can see that in the tweets of Elon Musk, who is absolutely terrified, as you can imagine, as you can see. And unfortunately, this is type of leadership that we see in the West, and Elon Musk would be first to sell out West to China, no problem. The same as there's Ray Dalio there, who's also so-called leader, but most of the leadership, unfortunately, in the West, they basically they ready to sell out the West itself to whoever is stronger or the highest bidder. Unfortunately, there is definite degeneration of the leadership in the West. At the same time, luckily, he's not going to decide the fate of Ukrainian and the fate was what is going on the battlefield, because it's really in the hands of Ukrainian people and Ukrainian society. As I mentioned before, it's not even Ukrainian leadership, because that leadership is actually a big part of the problem. Now let's actually jump to the battlefield. Let's just quickly do a walkthrough. As I said, there is not much has changed. The situation along the state border is getting somewhat more heated, somewhat more elevated. Russian side reporting artillery strikes from Ukraine, and Ukraine reports the same from Russia. So basically, it's getting a little bit heated along the border. Now let's jump quickly to the North Luhansk front line. Things here are more or less stable. Ukrainian side clearly lost momentum. Russian troops are digging in. It's going to be, again, pretty bloody attempt to dislodge Russian defenses at this point. That's very clear. And even Russian troops actively, for the second day, counterattacking. The objective is Terni, essentially, to split Ukrainian forces into two pieces, and then obviously you can destroy first piece and then kind of clean up the north. So basically the idea is the first objective of the Russian troops, if they want to sort of defend here, is to clear up this area between the two rivers, essentially. They're still not strong enough in numbers, but nevertheless, the initial shock and panic is gone, and things are getting are going to get somewhat more difficult for the Ukrainian side here in the coming days. Now let's quickly move to this North Donbass front line. And things here are all the same. Wagner mercenaries continuing attacks non-stop, pretty aggressive. As I said many times, they are probably the best infantry because they are not part of the state. There is no bureaucracy, and it's really just common sense. And common sense always better than bureaucracy, always prevails bureaucracy, even if bureaucracy in large numbers, even though Ukrainian soldiers are motivated on the individual level. However, bureaucracy is basically tying up the initiative, and that creates huge problem. That is a huge disadvantage, let's put this way. It's like, think about the big stone tied up to your leg, and you cannot move because of that, right? So as a result, I mentioned about 3 days ago that there were reports that Russian troops, Wagner mercenaries, managed to capture Vesela Dolyna, Zaitseve, and part of Vidradivka here. So that is confirmed. They did capture this territory. So now you see the sort of front line more or less goes kind of straight here, and they continue aggressively trying to advance. You can see they managed to create the salient, I think yesterday, so which again poses problems for Ukrainian defenses here. So it does look more and more that Bahmut is going to be sort of semi-encircled. Essentially, the next step is to create salient here, and that creates very difficult defensive position here for Ukrainian troops. In the past, I mentioned this many times, it's not a problem. as long as Ukrainian troops are attacking up north, because then this whole front line would actually collapse, and sort of that would be solution to this problem. But unfortunately, as we can see up north, Ukrainian troops lost their initiative at this point, and whenever they will try to renew large-scale offensive, it's definitely going to be difficult. Let's put this way. So, but in the meanwhile, Russian troops are advancing here. Now let's move to the central Donbass section of the front line. Things here are more or less the same. Russian troops attacking out of this Pyatyhatky salient. It's not visible here, but they continuing advancing like 50 meters every day, or 60 up to 100 meters every day. So there is a village that's next to Pyatyhatky, which is Pervomayske. So it looks like they managed to get to about half of that village at that point. I'll make a little bit more detailed map in a few days, but it's very clear that they continue sort of creating this salient. At the same time, there is potential danger to the flanks of the salient, but at the same time, it doesn't look like Ukrainian side has enough strong units here to really be able to kind of attack from the flanks, essentially. And similar situation is going on in Marinka, a little bit south of this road, south of Marinka, where Russian troops are aggressively attacking and making much smaller advances here. I don't know, like less than 50 meters every day, like 20-30 meters. It's super slow, but they slowly advancing here. Now let's move to Zaporizhya front line. Things here are stable, no essential news here at all. Now let's move to Kherson bridgehead. Here Ukrainian troops actually first day they tried to attack in large groups and strong groups with up to 10 tanks, between 10 to 20 IFVs, and they failed. And the problem is, as I said, this was enough time for the Russian troops to really dig in and create strong defensive position, just because it's very clear this is the most obvious direction axis of attack. So they dug in, they put all of the artillery that they still have, whatever the ammunition they have, and that really, Ukrainian troops at this point hitting in the most strongest defensive positions of the Russian troops here, and obviously that creates problems. Let's put it this way, and heavy losses, unnecessary losses, because as we said, the Ukrainian troops are missing that knowledge of offensive. They're not staying on top of the retreating enemy. They slowly moving behind, and that allowed Russian troops to basically quickly rebuild defenses here. And at this point, it's going to be super hard to break through, because, as I said, it's not a concrete sort of wall here, but it's pretty strong wall at this point. So the basically attack should be shifted to somewhere else, maybe along the Inhulets River here, like something, or from this area. But it's for sure this is going to be the worst area of attack at this point here. And here, as we discussed, there is this kind of like a small ridges flooded with water, so they kind of creating natural protective barriers for Russian troops. So you left with very short section of the front line, about 10 to 15 kilometers, where you can attack. And obviously it's not hard for the Russian command and troops to figure out where the attacks are going to happen. So again, so today was a major Ukrainian attack which failed. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow, bye bye.